Good afternoon. Not legal advice. Like, subscribe, share, comment, question. Uh, I wasn't planning on doing this one because I'm doing a live stream with JR, little JR, not big JR, later on today, which is Saturday, July 1st, I think. Yeah, I think it's July 1st. Um, but I saw something, I think last night about Mullen, and it just annoyed me. So I wanted to discuss it, throw it out, and maybe it'll help somebody save them a few bucks down the road. So that was my thinking. And I have nothing against Mullen. I hope it's successful, by the way, because I'm a big fan of EVs, and I live in California, and I know that's where it rises. And I'm familiar with the track record of the CEO, which is controversial somewhat, but I'm hoping he's successful. So to just take it that, because I want EVs to be successful. And if you follow Tesla, you understand that it's important that the market turn over to electric vehicles. So all for Mullen working out. So I followed it for a couple of years, maybe a little longer. And I know it's struggled. I know it's apparently been shorted. So the price and then they did a reverse stock split, and then the price dropped again. So I followed that, and I know that they just generated their first revenue. So they sold 22 vehicles, I think at an approximate price of $14,000 a vehicle for 308,000 or so dollars. So that's good because that's their first revenue. And I think their CEO indicated that they have been around for 14 years, approximately. So this is the first revenue, but EVs are tough. These are class one through I think class three EVs, which may expand to class four through class six down the road. So those are heavier vehicles. But right now we're talking about class one and class three, which are the ones they're apparently going to produce. So there's a YouTuber, and he seems like a very nice guy. I think he's in Canada, and he's follows Mullen and other stocks very carefully. He takes you on quite a journey in his analysis. So one of the stocks he follows is Mullen. He's developed a personal relationship with the CEO. Okay, I'll call it a personal relationship. He has a relationship with the CEO. So they've communicated a few times, and he recently did an interview. And the interview bothered me, although in a prior, I guess, video he put out, he did reflect that there were going to be edits that the interviewee, which was this case the CEO of Mullen, would make. So he threw that out. But then he went ahead and he did an interview, and it was released recently, either yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And I've gone through it at least twice, and I've seen other people's analysis, so I feel comfortable about what was said. But without going into too much of the content, although I'll address that a little bit, he acknowledged that he allowed this. So this is the YouTuber's channel. And listen, I appreciate the information. I just don't think this was good judgment, just in my opinion. You make your own decision, you do your own due diligence. But he let the CEO have final cut. So he let the CEO of a company that he's theoretically just reviewing be the producer. And I just find that poor judgment at best and reprehensible at worst. Now, I presume he's not being compensated, and I appreciate and I expect, I think everything he's doing is in good faith. If it's not, then that's bad. But if it was done in good faith, I just thought it was bad judgment. You can't give the company that you're critiquing the right to produce your critique, because that makes you or some might say, that makes you a shill to the company. So I just think it really looks bad. And if it were me and I was in that position, and I'm not, So this is my speculation. I would have said no, and I would have disclosed the fact that they asked me to have final cut, and I refused. And that's how it would end. But I understand your position. And by the way, to the CEO of Mullen, I know you offered this particular gentleman a visit to your plant in California, where I'm located, in August. I would be very cordial to you, but ask you questions, and would like the same opportunity if you want to include me in the same visit in August. So feel free to reach out to me. But I have some other issues. So I watched the video, and the CEO had a lot of complaints, say he was targeted, perhaps. Maybe he was. I don't know. He indicated that there was a problem with his lenders. I understood that too, but there is a problem with that too. Since I follow naked shorting, and one of the concerns is that Mullen's been naked shorted. So in other words, not only has it been diluted by selling all those shares, etc., but on top of that, there is naked shorting. So parties are shorting Mullen stock without being able to locate shares, or without the shares existing, or without there being any ability to cover those shares. And I know there was a reference to Share Intel recently. And I know Share Intel because Share Intel is connected to West Christian. But I believe, as far as I understand, that West Christian is not represent, and West Christian is let's say, the leading attorney dealing with naked shorting in the United States. But I don't believe that Mullen has hired West Christian to represent them. He is often or currently associated with Share Intel, but I don't, or whatever the name of the company. I forgot the name of the company, but I'm not speaking on his behalf, obviously. But if Mullen has hired them, they should announce it, and they can announce that, and that would be material. But there's another guy who deals with toxic lending, and also an attorney, Mark Brazil. I've seen him through MMTLP, and that's what he does. And I understand also there's other gentlemen who advise companies as to how to deal with naked shorting. And it's my understanding, because he said this, that a gentleman by the first name of Ham advised your CEO how to deal with the toxic lenders and all the naked shorting. And your CEO elected not to pursue that. Instead of that, he pursued the trek of doing a reverse stock split. And if you followed Ham, also he would say those are almost negative, almost always ineffective, and in fact, all it lets happen is, so the price goes up temporarily, which it did, and then the shorts go back and they short down back past where you left, which is exactly what's happened here. So you end up just more, in essence, further dilution of shareholder value. So apparently the CEO, and if it's untrue, the CEO should come out and say it. But there's somebody saying that the CEO was advised how to deal with those shorts, and the CEO poo-pooed it, instead did the reverse stock split, which apparently he's going to do again, or wants to do again. So I think that happens to be a real problem as far as I'm concerned. He also indicated in this particular video that they had an abundance of cash. So apparently they have about $250 million in cash. But we didn't talk about a burn rate. So there was no discussion about what the burn rate is. And if you're in production of electric vehicles, you burn cash fast. See Lucid, EG. And I know this same gentleman follows Lucid too. But you could burn cash fast. And apparently they're about to go into production. So I would expect their cash burn rate to increase. So we don't know if $250 million is an adequate amount. For Tesla, that's a drop in the bucket. For Mullen, we don't know. So we don't know the value, and that was placed in terms of, I think the CEO indicated the stock was trading below value. But if you're factoring in production costs, then maybe you're not. And you probably don't have a cushion. Because I know after this interview, and I think the interview happened sometime in the week of June 26th, on the 30th, because of this interview, they filed an 8K, I think it was an 8K form, which specifically cites the interview. And so somebody felt that after the interview that I'm reciting to you or referencing to you, somebody in the legal department said, you better send out a form to make clear, to basically cover someone's butt. And I didn't think anything particular in that interview was jumped out at me, but there was some reference to like manufacturing, production, and numbers. So it may be that when legal had a chance to re-listen to it, they had a different decision. This was after probably they had agreed to the edits. So this is, again, I just want to point this and put this in context. It's an interview done by a YouTuber who analyzes a bunch of stocks, and he is going to the CEO, but he agreed to let the CEO, and I would guess his counsel and whoever, have final cut. So they made one edit, and then they made some other edits. Now, they may have removed information because they didn't, it may have been too aggressive in terms of predictions, and then it didn't want to get called out on it. That's perfectly understandable. But the fact that they had to produce a document just because of this interview, because it references the interview, I think it's in item 7.01. It specifically it references the interview. So anyway, back to the interview. So this is a long interview with the CEO, and besides the invitation for the interviewer to come back and review things, I think the CEO just makes a lot of general comments. He does cite the capacity, but he doesn't talk about deliveries. He does talk about production, but he doesn't talk about pre-production. And I follow Tesla and EVs pretty carefully. And generally, when you start pre-production, it doesn't happen like in a month that you're producing mass numbers of vehicles. It goes at a much slower rate. So I think in the interview I heard, there was discussion of production starting in July and deliveries maybe August, September. I think there was two different deliveries. And I just don't see that as being realistic, just based upon how I follow other EV companies. Anything can happen. I'm not going to dispute that. But based on how I see other EV companies, when you start production, it's tricky and it takes a while to get things right. You could do small numbers, just like Elon Musk says you can do a prototype. Anybody can do a prototype, but mass production is a tough row to hoe. And that's why nobody makes, other than Tesla and maybe BYD, that's why nobody else makes any money in so far to date. So he talked about the production factor, but I don't think the timeline is correct. And also, I don't think he has any experience with regard to the production of vehicles or a science background. I think his background was music. And one of the reasons why, and everybody references Tesla throughout, but one of the things that Tesla had going was Elon Musk. Because whether you like him or not, he's a brilliant guy. And he's a science guy. And when he would be on the floor when Tesla was struggling and nearly went bankrupt, he would have decision making as to all steps, and he would have understanding of what was going on. When I listened to the interview with the CEO, he referred to others. I think John Taylor, some guy, maybe a super talented guy, but some guy who had been affiliated with Tesla's architecture at the Fremont plant. Now, it happens that the Fremont plant is the least efficient plant in Tesla's arsenal, but maybe he did a great job in the architecture. But just an interesting comparison. But he has a background in electric vehicles. That's great. And then there was citation to another Bollinger, I guess. somebody else who had a track record, even though if you look at it as to electric vehicles, Bollinger Motors started with a particular plan of producing a certain vehicle, then dumped that plan, then were bought out by Mullen, and now they're maybe reconsidering going back to the initial plan. So I don't think it's been quite smooth that way, but perhaps that will work out too. But I think the timelines are off. So when I heard that interview, when I heard there was edit cuts, when I heard uh, about projections, when I heard references to Tesla, I just, to be honest, I just wasn't super impressed by the CEO and his acumen for this industry. So, but after that, then there's uh, a report filed, an 8K dated June 30th at 2:47 p.m. And again, it references the interview. So it's sent out as a result of the interview. And after what I've indicated was said, and it was very general and not supported, other than maybe capacity, that was about as specific as they got, and maybe like dates, the July, whatever. I looked at the 8K and I was astonished because I haven't heard the interviewer address this yet. And I looked back, by the way, to a prior 8K earlier in 2023, which indicated that the accountants or the accountancy and auditors were being fired or leaving, no longer working, even though everybody left holding hands and singing songs together, but they left and new auditors, accountants were coming in. So when I looked at the recent filing, I looked at the new disclaimer. So this is disclaimer produced with regard to the interview, and just to kind of summarize, it talks about they had incurred significant losses since inception, and they expect to continue to incur losses for the foreseeable future. Not a big deal, honestly. New company, growth company, not a big deal. We require substantial additional financing to effectuate our business plan. Could be a big deal because they've done a ton of dilution. If they have to dilute further to do stock offerings, that could be problematic if they raise their money through loans or bonds or some other method or selling some equity or some other means or making a ton of money. That's great, but that could be problematic, especially for a company that's been hugely diluted. The next one caused me to scratch my head because I haven't understood whether those 22 vehicles that were sold, whether they produced them, didn't produce them, because they sold 22 vehicles, which they're going to take the revenue for in the second quarter of 2023. And here in the third limiting factor, it says we have not yet manufactured or sold any production vehicles to customers and may never develop or manufacture any vehicles. It's a pretty aggressive warning when the guy, so this is June 30th, when the guy says they're going into production the next day, literally. So that caused me concern. The next one says our limited operating history makes it difficult to evaluate future business prospects. Okay, kind of general, but where the CEO said they'd been in business for 14 years, this kind of poo-poos that or their experience. And, if you think about it, 14 years of existence and selling 22 vehicles for $308,000 in revenue for a loss of at least $499 million is not tremendous. The next two really concern me. So we know about, per the prior 8K, there was a reference to the accountants being fired. So this would be the new accountants or new auditors. Our auditors expressed substantial doubt about our ability to continue on as a going concern. That causes me grave concern. And that's something the CEO should address immediately. To the extent that the likelihood of Mullen having further existence, that's got to be addressed, especially after he had, in essence, in the interview, he was making nice. The company was going to do great. I'm summarizing. I'm not quoting directly, but he indicated the company was going to do well, that he was again unfairly targeted, etc. And he makes those statements, and then comes out afterwards. It's really disconcerting. Um, at least I feel that way, especially about the auditor expressing doubt as to their ability as to a going concern. And this is their filing. This is not me. Okay. The next part, again, I was astonished by this, at least part of it. Certain of our lenders and the Internal Revenue Service have lien on our assets. Well, I understand why lenders might have security and secured interests. And I guess they said, I think he alluded to those being toxic lenders who make the loans, get convertible interests, and then convert their interests and then short the stock. So I understand that, and that's sometimes the small companies, they're stuck with that. That's not the problem. The problem was, why does the IRS have liens on Mullen's assets? Where does that come from? What was the necessity of that? If Mullen has all the extra cash, why is it not paying the IRS? Why is it letting there be tax liens? Is that the only tax lien? What's the amount of the tax lien? Is it new? Is it going to show up in the next quarterly report? I think that should be addressed by the CEO also. There are beyond that, there's probably 35, maybe more, other limiting conditions. But the first few that were referenced, and the ones I specifically addressed, especially by the new auditor and about the IRS lien and about the production manufacturing, that's cause for concern, at least in my mind. Maybe perfectly explainable. And again, like I said, Mullen may do super. The company and the stock may do well in the future. But a lot of questions to be answered. And I most of all, I want the gentleman who did the interview to address how he feels now in light of the 8K. He goes out, does an interview, lets them edit it, and then they put on disclaimers afterwards, after the edits. I think that's kind of an embarrassing situation. I know he was well intended, but I don't think he did anybody a favor. Maybe he did. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, we got more information out, so that's good. But I think hopefully people didn't act on his information, because I know he always says to do their own due diligence, as I always say also, not rely on this. Anyway, those are kind of the things that popped out to me. I just thought it was ridiculous. And this doesn't include, 2 months ago, there was another gentleman who was making representations that seemed to be connected to Mullen, related deals in Middle East and $10 billion of revenue. So this is not the first issue that I have with what seems to me to be irregularities at Mullen. But I could be wrong. But those issues that are referenced should be addressed. Anyway, be well. Take care.